Okay. All right, put me on YouTube. Or sorry, put me on Facebook. I know it's not on Facebook because I don't have the toggle on. Boom. I think we're good, man.
Yep, I see you.
Fantastic. Well, how nice for that to run so smoothly. All right, so I'll throw us on Facebook, and as soon as I get on Facebook, we'll be good to go, man.
Sweet.
All right. Going on Facebook. There we go. All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. That was the smoothest this whole thing has gone so far, as we've been trying to up our broadcast game, and YouTube fired right up. Looks like Facebook has fired right up. I'm feeling good about it. Working out the kinks with everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon as we have this later edition of Walking Through History. Appreciate you working with us on the time, and we hope that this will be beneficial for you as you join in with us as we continue to walk through the story of the Bible. We have made our way through the book of Genesis, and we have now transitioned into the book of Exodus. We have seen in chapter 1 the difficulty that the children of Israel were under in Egypt with the changing of pharaohs and the forgetting of Joseph and the great good that he had done for Egypt. We have seen the crying out of God's people to their God for deliverance. We've seen the deliverer Moses enter the picture. We have read about God going to Moses and letting him know that you are going to be that deliverer. Aaron comes into the picture, and now it is time for us to see what happens. What happens now that Moses and his compatriot Aaron, his brother, go and stand before Pharaoh. If you never read this for the first time, you might probably don't know. Well, what's going to happen? Is Pharaoh going to listen to a God who has sent 2 representatives to come and to demand that his people be let go? What does he acknowledge that God? Does he not acknowledge that God? Does he approve the request? Does he deny it? We're going to look into that this afternoon and see how God's plan is going to continue to play out for his people. As always, my good friend Alan Sienestrang is here with me this afternoon. I probably could have had him up the entire time there, but there's Alan. Alan,
hello.
Thanks for being here, buddy. Hope that you have had a great Tuesday, and I'm excited to get into this text with you this afternoon.
Yeah, we got another genealogy here to look forward to, so I'm excited about that. You know how I love those. I love those passages. I'm all about those.
That's Lincoln's second middle name, right? Genealogy.
Alan Genealogy Sienestrang. Lincoln Alan. Yeah.
Pretty sure Melanie would not go for that. Nonetheless, we are here in Genesis chapter 5. Genesis chapter 5. I invite you to join us here in this text, or you can just follow along with me as I will have this text on the screen here for us to all look at together. Genesis chapter 5. Again, we are beginning in verse 1. Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. Later, this is after God has gone to Moses in the burning bush. This is after Moses' excuses. This is after God giving the remedy of, I'm going to send your brother Aaron to be the spokesman. Since you don't think you can talk, I know Aaron can. He's going to be the spokesman for you. Here is what happens as Moses and Aaron now go in to speak with Pharaoh and to make this request that has been commissioned to them by God for them to go present before Pharaoh. In Exodus chapter 5 and verse 1, later, Moses and Aaron went in and said to Pharaoh, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, let my people go. Let my people go so that they may hold a festival for me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh responded, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him by letting Israel go? I don't know the Lord, and besides, I will not let Israel go." They answer, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go on a 3-day trip into the wilderness so that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God, or else he may strike us with a plague or sword." And the king of Egypt said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why are you causing the people to neglect their work? Get to your labor. And Pharaoh also said, look, the people of the land are so numerous, and you would stop them from their labor. The response, Alan, that we see from Pharaoh is not a positive one. In fact, he says, who is the Lord? Well, what's interesting, Alan, is that this is in some ways a question that Moses asked back in chapter 3, whenever the Lord is standing before him, or when the Lord standing before him, he asked, well, who do I say? Who do I say that is sending me to you, to the Israelites, in order for you to believe that I've been sent by a great divinity? Here, Pharaoh asked them to say, well, who is the Lord? How does that play into the mindset of Pharaoh, Alan? Thinking about it maybe from a perspective of an Egyptian understanding of divinity and the supernatural and the divine.
Well, I would actually go back even a little bit further than chapter 3 and verse 14, when God gives his name. Moses asked, who is, what name should I give them? Well, go back a little bit further. Moses just asks in verse 11, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? So you see the contrast between Moses and Pharaoh. God is speaking to Moses in chapter 3, verse 11, and giving him this great mission here. And, we see that Moses is, a little bit hesitant to go. So there is a flaw there, but his humility is, paramount here. He's just saying, who am I? How am I worthy of this mission? Well, fast forward to Pharaoh, who is the Lord? You can just see the defiance. I honestly, I think it's tough to, we obviously don't know, but just the length of time that the Israelites had been there, I find it hard to believe that he's never heard about their God before. Obviously, he doesn't worship the God of the Hebrews at all, but I don't think this is just a statement of curiosity because I've never heard of this God before. I definitely see that this is who are you to say this to me? And you mentioned the mindset of Pharaoh. What was his mindset? He obviously they had lots of gods that they worship, but paramount was the Pharaoh himself. He was a god on earth, both in his own eyes and the people's eyes, the people of Egypt. Right. So for any other lord, any other god to come in and try to order him around, he saw himself as number one. So he would, why should I obey someone? To paraphrase, who is the Lord that I should obey him? Why should I obey some other God that I am better than, is what he's saying. I don't know the Lord, which is kind of a key. I love that phrase. I don't know the Lord. Well, clearly he doesn't. He's going to know the Lord. And that's really what these next several chapters are about. The Egyptians will know the Lord one way or the other. It's kind of interesting. We talk about later in the New Testament, every knee will bow. Well, there's two ways a knee will bow: by that person doing that themselves, or God forcing that upon them. And here we're going to see Pharaoh. He's going to bow the knee. He's going to know the Lord, but it's going to be, it's not going to be in the best way. It's going to be in the worst way for him possible. And of course, he flatly rejects. The Lord said, "Let my people go," and he says, "I will not let Israel go." Two sentences right there, complete opposites. He clearly rejects God's command.
To get a little more specific, Alan, what you're saying about Pharaoh thinking of himself as a deity, the pharaohs were understood in Egyptian supernatural understanding as being the physical incarnation of the god Horus. Horus being one of the top gods within the understanding again of Egyptian divinity and the supernatural. And another aspect of this then is, so to add on to that, so first of all, as you mentioned, Pharaoh understood himself to be a god, again, specifically the incarnation of the god Horus. To add on to that, the understanding of the ancients in regards to the supernatural and to gods, to divinities, was that they were geographically located, that they were tied to a specific region. That's why you have not only the god of the Amorites, but that the god of the Amorites lived in that place, and that was his territory. For Pharaoh to say, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him?" Who gives this God, the Lord, who gives him the right to come into my territory and to tell me, the God of this land, that I ought to do this or I ought to do that? To Pharaoh, this is a slap in the face. How dare you come into my kingdom and tell me what to do with the people that are under my charge? No, I don't know this God. I am the God of this land. Again, specifically the incarnate Horus in the flesh. He says it's not going to happen. And we can see and we can understand here the anger and the frustration that Pharaoh has in response to this, because what does he say in verse number 4? He says, "Hold on a second. Why are you even over here talking to me? You need to get to work. You and your people need to quit bothering me. You need to quit trying to come up with these plans to allow you to leave this place. You just need to get to work." Pharaoh adds to that in verse number 6. Not only do you need to get to work, but hey, you know what? If you have enough time to come and to talk to me and to make these requests, and if you think you have enough time to go out into the wilderness and to spend 3 days, so 3 days there and presumably 3 days back, a whole week's worth of time, if you have that much time on your hands, you think, then you know what? You need to get to work, and I'm going to give you some more work on top of that. That's why we read in verse number 6 that day Pharaoh commanded the overseers of the people as well as their foremen, don't continue to supply the people with straw for making bricks as before. They must go and gather straw for themselves, but require the same quota, and this is key here, require the same quota of bricks from them as they were making before. Do not reduce it, for they are slackers. That's the first time we'll see this. We're going to see this again here in a bit. They are slackers. That is why they are crying out, "Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Impose heavier work on the men." And then they will be occupied with it and not pay attention to deceptive words. He's worried about what Moses and Aaron are going to be saying to the people. So verse 10, the overseers and the foremen of the people went out and said to them, "This is what Pharaoh says. I am not giving you straw. Go get straw yourselves whenever you can find it. But there will be no reduction at all in your workload." So the people scattered throughout the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. The overseers insisted, "Finish your assigned work each day, just as you did when straw was provided." And then the Israelite foremen, whom Pharaoh's slave drivers had set over the people, were beaten and asked, "Why have you finished making your prescribed number of bricks?" Or excuse me, why have you not finished making your prescribed number of bricks yesterday or today as you did before? So the Israelite foreman went in and cried for help to Pharaoh. "Why are you treating your servants this way? No straw has been given to your servants, yet you say to us, 'Make bricks.' Look, your servants are being beaten, but it is your own people who are at fault." But he, being Pharaoh, said, "You are slackers. That is why you are saying, 'Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord.' Now get to work. No straw will be given to you, but you must produce the same quantity of bricks." The situation here for the children of Israel, it deteriorates to an even worse place than it was before. Remember the progress of the status in Israel. Let's begin with Joseph in Israel. Joseph came into Israel as a slave. He went from being a slave to being a prisoner. He went from being a prisoner to being a right-hand person to Pharaoh. He went from being that right-hand person of Pharaoh to being second in command of Pharaoh. His whole family being in Egypt, them having an exalted position in Pharaoh's eyes, they're allowed to have this great land of Goshen where they can live and thrive as a family. Exodus chapter 1 says that they have thrived as a family. They've grown into this mighty nation, and they've gone from this mighty nation now to slaves. And now they've gone from slaves to being completely overworked slaves. So you have really this beginning low, getting to a peak, and now, boom, they've dropped to this horrible position within this land. You would think, coming to this text, Moses and Aaron, they're going to go to Pharaoh. They're going to say, "Hey, the Lord says, let my people go. We think that this is going to be a great time for them, a time of refreshing for them to go and to worship God. And yet, instead of their status improving within Egypt, Alan, it gets so much worse.
I wish we could get a little bit more at the beginning in verse 5, that conversation with Moses and Aaron and Pharaoh, or in beginning of chapter 5, uh, just to add to the defiance that Pharaoh has. You have that first statement, who is the Lord? Verse 2, I don't know the Lord. Then Moses and Aaron come back and say, hey, the God of the Hebrews, they get a little bit more specific. The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go on a 3-day trip. So you may sacrifice. And they give him a warning too. This is a God that can strike us with plague or a sword. So they get more serious. He gives them, identifies who is talking, God of the Hebrews, tells Pharaoh what they want, which seems like a pretty 3-day trip, like you said. Okay, 3 days in, 3 days back. They're gone for a week. I would assume that Pharaoh can kind of see through this, and I can't believe that he's just denying them a week trip and he thinks they'll come back. I'm sure he's thinking they're not coming back, so why would I let them go? But it's interesting, even after that more thorough explanation and that thorough warning, this is his reaction. I mean, he could just say no and keep things as is, but not only is he defiant, he's hard of heart. Now he wants to stick it even more. I mean, they're already, Pharaoh and the Egyptians are already in sin just for their treatment of this, what were guests in their land, the Israelites. And now to make this worse, piling on, just again, it kind of solidifies Pharaoh's mindset and his character in this story.
Just realized I was muted. There was no one in Egypt who was of higher status than Pharaoh. He is the God of Egypt, and to me, it just feels like he's sensing disrespect from here. Like, you think you're really going to get away with this? You know what? If this is what you're going to try to do, I'm going to make life so much more difficult on you. And instead of the foreman, which that seems to be the foreman in the text, seem to be Israelite foremen. Mm-hmm. They seem to be people of Israel who were the leaders of Israel, who were to help make sure that Israel was doing the work that they were given to do. So there seems to be a difference here between the overseers of the people, those who've been Egyptians, and then the foremen who were Israelites. The Israelite foremen come to Pharaoh and they say, hey, why are you treating us like this? Why have you maintained our workload? Let's say, just again, random number, we have to make 1,000 bricks a day. Well, it seems like the process prior to this was the Egyptians would supply to them the straw with which they can make the bricks. So that cut out a step of the process. But now Pharaoh is saying, not only am I going to maintain your status quo of 1,000 bricks, but now I'm going to add in another layer for it where you need to go get your brick. You need to go get the straw too. So it is doubling the workload in a sense. They're having to do more work to produce the same amount of bricks. And all of this has to be done in the same day. Why would somebody do that? To me, they would do that if they felt disrespected and if they felt they needed to assert their dominance, assert their authority. So they come to Pharaoh and they say, why are you doing this? He said, I'll tell you why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because of your people, because of your Moses and your Aaron. They come to us. What does that do? That turns then the foreman against Moses and Aaron. That's why they say in verse number 20, they go to verse number 20. It says the foreman leave Pharaoh, and then they confronted Moses and Aaron. And they say, verse 21, may the Lord take note of you and judge, as if Moses and Aaron have done something horribly wrong. What has happened here is that Pharaoh has recognized that if I can turn the people against these two men, they're not going to listen to those deceptive words. That goes back to verse number 9. If I impose this heavy workload on them, they're not going to listen to these two buffoons who are coming to me and trying to mess up this operation that I have here in Egypt. And I don't think I actually read that part. Verse number, let's see, verse number 19, I think is where I need to pick up. That the Israelite foremen saw that they were in trouble when they were told, you cannot reduce your daily quota of bricks. Parentheses, me adding in here, even though now they had to do more work to produce that quota. Again, say 1,000 bricks. And when they left Pharaoh, they confronted. I think that's a key word. They're confronted Moses and Aaron, who stood waiting for them. And here's this scathing remark: "May the Lord take note of you and judge," which is funny because the Lord is the one that sent them there to begin with. Because you have made us reek to Pharaoh and his officials, putting a sword in their hand to kill us. So Moses went back to the Lord, Alan, we read, and asked, Lord, why have you caused trouble for this people? And why did you ever send me? Ever since I went into Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has caused trouble for all this people, and you haven't rescued your people at all. This seems like a difficult position for Moses. He's saying, Lord, you sent me here. And it just seems like I've made the situation worse. I'll be honest, I feel for Moses. I feel for him, and I feel for Aaron in the situation, because in their minds, knowing this is Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they're probably thinking we're going to march in there and we're going to do what we need to do. At least we might think that, except for the fact that God did say that Pharaoh wasn't going to cooperate. But even with that, Moses still is in a difficult predicament. What do you think about this response that he has going back to the Lord in verse 22, Alan?
I mean, I think that
it shows about Moses' mindset at the moment.
I think this is a completely legitimate question on Moses' part, and I think it should be noted that he goes back to the Lord. That's the right thing to do. He's got a question he doesn't understand. He's been warned that Pharaoh would reject this. I mean, so he should know. He should have known already that Pharaoh's going to say no. But I don't know that he was expecting this much extra trouble for them. He just figured Pharaoh would say no, and then he'd have to do some signs, and then eventually he'd say yes. I would assume that's kind of what Moses's mindset was. But now it is getting serious. I mean, the foreman in verse 21, putting a sword in their hand to kill us. Like, this is life and death now. He has made deep trouble for his people that he did not expect. I also want to note there's little snippets of the Israelite people and their lack of faith. We're starting to see little clues, which, if you know the rest of the story, you know that even after the Exodus and they're wandering in the wilderness, this generation of Israelites is just terrible. They're always lacking the faith that they should have.
That's put very kindly.
Yeah, we started to see, it's kind of interesting, right at the beginning of chapter 5, when Moses and Aaron go into Pharaoh, you get the first glimpse of maybe some just a lack of faith, because who was supposed to go and talk to Pharaoh? If you look back at chapter 3 and where was it? Oh man, I should have wrote it down. It was supposed to be the elders. Oh yeah, verse 18, chapter 3 and verse 18. They will listen to what you say. Then you, along with the elders of Israel, must go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of Hebrews, has met with us. So they give the right message, but it's Moses and Aaron that give the message. It's not Moses and Aaron and the elders, like God said in chapter 3. So you kind of wonder, well, where are the elders at this point? I would have hoped, at the end of chapter 4, Moses and Aaron go to the elders and they do all these signs, and they
says they believe,
they knelt low, they worshiped right at the end of chapter 5, and then where'd they go in chapter 5?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see these foremen, which I would assume these foremen and the elders of the people would probably be a lot of the same types of people. So at the first glimpse of trouble, I mean, they are, what did it say? They confronted Moses and Aaron. I mean, it's not just they went and talked to them, they confronted. I mean, when I hear confronted, I'm
They're
thinking
upset.
about, I mean, I'm up in their, I'm up in somebody's grill, really mad at them. I'm up in their face and confronting them. They're upset. They've just been beaten. So they're a little bit ticked off about that. And here's this Moses and Aaron causing trouble for them and you're making them reek to Pharaoh, as it says in verse 21. So you're starting to see a glimpse of how the people are. You see I mean, I think some faith in Moses here, and obviously he's a much better man than the people just by his willingness to go to the Lord and have these legitimate questions. And I think the legitimacy of those questions is backed up by God answering those questions coming up in chapter 6. I mean, he gives a pretty good answer to what Moses is talking about. So, I mean, God wouldn't back in when Moses is giving all the excuses, the good excuses God answers, the bad excuses God just says, be quiet and just do what you're told.
Yeah,
So this is a good question right here, and at the end of chapter 5.
I think you're spot on, Alan. I really think that this is Moses being real. We might look at Moses and think, what this is a weak moment on his part. How dare he? How dare he question God? How dare he think that God might not be with him? But to me, we have to think about what God has done up until this point. So God has made some incredible promises to Moses, and by extension to Aaron, and by extension to the elders and the whole people. And at this point, things are not going according to plan. And Moses, to me, if I'm going to summarize what he says in verses 22 and 23, he's basically asking, Lord, are you going to keep your promises or not? Therefore, what we see beginning in chapter 6, verse 1 is, as you said, the Lord's response to what seems to be a very heartfelt question. The Lord replied to Moses, Exodus 6 and verse 1, now, he said now, not before, but now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. What the Lord has done here, he set him up. God has set up Pharaoh for actually, I'm not going to say that yet. I'm going to hold that because I think we're going to talk about that more here in just a few minutes. Let me just read the text. Too much commentary. Let's read the text. Now, verse 1, you will see what I will do to Pharaoh because of a strong hand. Pay attention to that. He will let them go. And because of a strong hand, again, pay attention to that. He will drive them from the lands. Then God spoke to Moses, telling him, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty, but I was not known to them by the name the Lord. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land they lived in as aliens. Furthermore, I have heard the groaning of the Israelites whom the Egyptians are forcing to work as slaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore, tell the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from the forced labor of the Egyptians and rescue you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. You will know that I am the Lord your God who brought you out from the forced labor of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. So Moses told this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of their broken spirit and hard labor. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, go and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and let the Israelites go from his land. But Moses said in the Lord's presence, if the Israelites will not listen to me, then how will Pharaoh listen to me, since I am such a poor speaker? Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them commands concerning both the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. And what I see here is a very succinct answer from the Lord. It is very methodical in the way that he lays it out, and it begins with that first verse. What is going to happen? Again, he says, now you will see. I wonder, Alan, was this maybe the Lord's plan all along, that Pharaoh would initially reject and this then maybe give an opportunity for God to show exactly who he is? Are you thinking along the same lines I am? Because that seems to be where I'm leaning right now in the way the Lord is approaching the situation.
Well, I think we know that everything is the Lord's plan all along,
This is
but
true.
But he even, I mean, he's told Moses this, chapter 3 and verse 19. However, I know that the king of, I know that the king of Egypt will not allow you to go, even under force from a strong hand. So we still, um, you said you highlighted that strong hand. I, I was thinking about it, just the idea of God's hand. If I want to force someone to do something, I probably need to use more than just my hand. I'm not a big guy, but even if I was, I would probably need my arms, my legs, my core, my entire body to make someone do what I want them to do. I mean, Annabelle is 4 years old, but strong as an ox. So if she's ever, pitching a fit or something, it takes everything that I have just to hold her or grab her and pick her up. I mean, she's kicking and screaming or whatever. Homegirl's 30 pounds or 40 pounds or whatever. So it takes a lot just to force her to sit down or whatever I need her to do. So I just thought that phrase is so fun that it's used so much that it's just a hand, that's all that God needs, which obviously is kind of, God doesn't even have a hand. It's just an expression, but just that hand is all it takes to force Pharaoh, who again considers himself the top dog in the world, to force him and all of his armies to comply to his will.
So to build on top of that, the idea that we get looking at it from our perspective is exactly, I think, what you're saying, that the hand alone is not much. So for the Lord only to need a hand, it reminds me kind of Genesis 1. All the Lord needed to do was speak. He spoke everything to existence. Here, all the Lord needs to do is use a hand. But there's something else going on here, Alan, and that would be, again, understanding Pharaoh. Again, he is Horus incarnate. And Horus, the legendary history of Egypt. Egypt used to be split into two lands. There was Horus and there was the other god Seth. And Horus and Seth battled against each other, and Horus overtook Seth. And Horus was actually known as the strong hand of Egypt. So is it not curious then here that the exact phrase the Lord is going to use through Moses to tell Pharaoh this is what's going to happen is a strong hand? Earlier, Pharaoh might have taken the words of Moses and Aaron as a disrespectful slap in the face. Well, here it is not that he might have taken the words as a slap in the face, but here the Lord is, in fact, with that hand slapping Pharaoh in the face and telling him, this is what I'm going to do. You're not going to be able to stop it. You think you are the strong hand as Horus, this great god Horus? He's going to say, you're nothing. This is exactly what I'm going to do. But then Alan, he goes on from there, beginning of verse 2, and gives them a reminder. Reminds them exactly what I'm seeing here, reminds them of who he is, and also reminds them of the long history that he has had, that God has had with the family. Remember, we're going back to chapter 5 and verse 22. Moses is asking this seemingly legitimate question: are you going to keep your promises or not? God begins with saying, remember, I told you I was going to do this. Here's just a reminder of what I'm going to make happen. And then let me remind you as well of how long I've been with your family and what all I have done for your family and what all I've done through your family. Think about who it is that has helped you become this great nation. It's me. And it ends then in verse 5 with a remembrance. I've been with your family since Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob. I've made this great covenant with you in Genesis 12. Don't worry. I have not forgotten this covenant. Verse 5, I have remembered my covenant. So he takes what I'm going to do. He takes this history that he's had with the people. He tells them, I remember my covenant and I know what you're going through, and I'm going to rescue you from the hands of the Egyptians. I will take you, verse 7, as my people, and I will be your God, and you will know. Here's two things he's going to do here. Here in chapter 6, you will know that I am the Lord your God. But if we skipped ahead to chapter 7, what does he say in verse number 5? The Egyptians will know that I am your God. So the Lord's saying everybody's going to know. But Alan, as we get down to verse number 9, Moses seems to doubt that Israel's going to know. And he tells them, or actually Moses goes to Israel and tells them, but they don't know at this time. At this point, the text says they did not listen to him because of their broken spirit and hard labor. What do you make of the initial response here of Israel? You said this is the beginning of an unfortunate pattern of unfaithfulness, of distrust, even in a sense, a pattern of complaining and grumbling against the Lord. Do you blame them really at this point, though, in this section of the story?
I don't blame Moses for being surprised at this because their initial reaction, like we saw at the end of chapter 4, all the signs and really this whole statement by God at the beginning here is designed for. This isn't a message that Moses is supposed to give to Pharaoh. This is the message beginning in really in verse 2 that he's supposed to give to the Israelites.
That's a great point.
And
Great
and
point.
to me, it's so powerful because of all of a couple things, because of the I am the Lord. I mean, this is God himself. When he says that, I am the Lord, he says it at the beginning, he says it in the middle, he says it at the end. I think he says it 4 times up into from verse 2 into verse 8. I mean, consider that a signature of God. That's I mean, we think about our signature, just even in a worldly sense, our signature, binds a law. The signature of a president binds a law or approves a law. I mean, our signature that we put on a mortgage or a marriage license or any legal document that makes it effective. So I mean, this is God's signature. I mean, just imagine, no different than if there was the 2 stone tablets and then there's I am the Lord at the bottom and his actual mark that he makes, and flaming fire or whatever it would be. Like this is how this is powerful in this section. and and notice what he does. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You mentioned he calls to remembrance the history that's involved here. And we can come back and talk about how didn't have the same name in verse 3 that the Israelites and Moses have now. He, not known to them by my name, the Lord. He didn't, he gave them the promises, but not in the same way. This is a greater revelation, I think, to the Israelites of this day than even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob got. And he reminds them that he is remembered. He's remembering their covenant. And I love that it mentions in verse 6, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. So telling him what he's going to do, not just save them, but redeem them, which is just a word dripping with so much more biblical significance than even Moses, I think, would have realized at the time. But this whole statement is about as powerful a just a description of God and who he is and what he does, and then match that with his signature on this. I mean, this is binding, and that makes verse 9 so much more heartbreaking, because this is as clear and as powerful as God can be. I mean, I think even more so than his words are more powerful than the signs that he gave. But verse 9, Moses told this to the Israelites, and they did not listen to him because of their broken spirit and hard labor. So it's just, I mean, you feel for the Israelites. Yes, they are broken. They've endured this their entire life. So it's no surprise that they are just, they're tired.
Mm-hmm.
But, you would think any sort of, they're just without hope at this point. They have given up hope, and it's just unfortunate and sad.
Yeah, you think about it from their perspective. They've cried out to the Lord. The Lord has said, I've listened to you. The Lord has sent this deliverer in the form of Moses and then his brother Aaron. And things haven't gotten better. And in fact, they've gotten worse. I can understand why it is that they would have a difficult time believing at this point. Things haven't improved at all. but then from Moses' perspective, he says, listen, if I can't even get your people to buy into this, this idea that you have, this plan that you have put together for their deliverance, then if they won't believe, then whenever the Lord tells Moses, go and tell Pharaoh, the king of Israel, to let the Israelites, my people, go, Moses says, listen, why would he believe? If your own people are not believing you, why would Pharaoh believe you? And it's interesting here to me that the Lord shows his patience. The Lord shows his extreme patience here. That there has to be some sort of significance here in this text. The fact that Moses says this, and it's highlighted in the Lord's presence. In the Lord's presence, to do such thing, it almost seems. Thank you, sister-in-law. Appreciate you texting me right in the middle. I'll tell you what, man. Love my family. They are wonderful people. They text me at the worst times whenever I'm doing a show. I get no texts all day long, and as soon as I sit down and push play, everybody, it makes me a popular person. Nonetheless, it almost seems as if this is a back and forth conversation, that the Lord comes to Moses and speaks to him. The Lord kind of exits the stage. Moses gives a response. The Lord comes back, gives some response again, exits the stage. But here it seems like Moses doesn't even give the Lord time to leave or time to depart. In the Lord's presence, he says, if they won't listen to me, then why would Pharaoh listen to me? And oh, by the way, don't forget, I'm a poor speaker. And yet the Lord, in his patience, speaks both to Moses and Aaron, and they gave them commands concerning both the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt. And we're thinking here, great, time to get down to business, time to hear the story. But out of nowhere, out of left field, Alan, here comes this genealogy. And just for the sake of time, we're not going to read the genealogy. I will welcome you. I will welcome you to go and read it yourself. Nobody needs to hear me butcher these poor Hebrew names. But this genealogy just seems to be very ill-placed, misplaced. I definitely don't want to impugn a mistake upon the biblical inspired writers. But Alan, why? Why does it make any sense for this genealogy to be dropped right here in this place to kind of interrupt the flow of the story? It's not even a transition. Think about it. It reminds me of Genesis 37, 38, 39. There's this random chapter dropped in there. Why this right here? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you have to look at verse 13. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. This is kind of more of a summary statement in verse 13. And then you kind of compare that to verse 26. It was this Aaron and Moses whom the Lord told, bring the Israelites out of the land. So the focus here is Moses and Aaron. And I think what we're seeing is why Moses and Aaron? Why were they the ones? You already get a glimpse of God's kind of special relationship with Moses, because throughout the book of Genesis, even Abraham, God did not speak to Abraham in the same way. He came to Abraham, by night or in dreams. Same with Jacob. I mean, maybe you got the sense that it was only a couple times in their life that there were monumental times, but there was this big, conversation with God, talking with the patriarchs. Well, with Moses, it's just like they're constantly chatting back and forth. And it almost seems with Moses that obviously he's talking to God, but he's comfortable enough to be able to come with these questions and not get rebuked every time. So I don't think Moses is being disrespectful in any way, but God has just formed a relationship with him to where Moses is comfortable to speak honestly. And I think that's great. I mean, yes, we should never be disrespectful to God or to someone, a father or an elder or someone above us, but to have that relationship to just be able to speak honestly and truthfully, I mean, I think that's what God wants, that comfortableness. I mean, in our prayers, I think the same thing. We should be able to, I mean, God knows what we're thinking, so we might as well just, pour our hearts out to him. But getting back to the genealogy here, that's the focus. Moses and Aaron in verse 13, Moses and Aaron in 26. Well, what's so special about Moses and Aaron? How do we express, how do we show that Moses and Aaron are the right people for this message? Because remember, they're being doubted now. They're being confronted by the people. They're being doubted by the elders, by the foremen, by the people, that they're causing trouble. They're having this doubt. So it really is a perfect time for this type of genealogy to be put in, because it shows that God had a plan. He had set them up for this time, uh, even before they were born. So it starts off with Reuben and Simeon. You see, okay, it's going to be a genealogy of all the sons of Israel, because we're starting with Reuben, the oldest, and Simeon, and then Levi, but we don't go any farther than Levi. So, it really wasn't, the rest of the brothers wasn't the important part here. We are focusing on Levi. And you get three sons of Levi, which those are important enough names, because that's how the priesthood is going to be divided into those three sons, the three clans, the Gershonites. I'm looking at verse 16, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Those are the three kind of groups of priests. And then it's from the Kohathites, verse 18, you have the sons of Kohath. One of them is Amram. And remember, with the genealogies, this doesn't necessarily mean that Kohath is the biological father of Amram. This could just be I'm sure we're skipping several generations here. But we know later on that Amram married his father's, verse 20, married his father's sister Jochebed, and she bore Aaron and Moses. So Amram and Jochebed are the parents of Aaron and Moses. And so that's kind of the focus there. We get some information about Aaron in verse 23. He married a girl who was the daughter of Aminadab and the sister of Nahshon. And those names might be recognizable to you, because both of them are of the line of Judah, of the line of Christ. So they're going to be mentioned in Matthew just in Matthew, I believe. But so Aaron marries into the family, the royal family, basically of they're not the royal family yet, but the seed family of Judah. And of course, then it mentions the sons that Aaron had: Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, Ithamar, and later Eleazar's son is Phinehas. So just mentioning these are all names that they haven't come up yet, but they are part of the priesthood leadership that will come into play later on. And again, this whole point, having this right here, is just establishing the significance of Aaron and Moses and their importance and God's plan for them all along.
Yeah, and remembering too that this would have been written, and this story wasn't being written as the story was playing out. So as this is being written, the writers can think, okay, if people are reading this, they might be doubting this Moses and Aaron character. Let's show them the confidence that they ought to have. Why? Because of where they've come from and who they're eventually going to produce. Putting all these names together, not just solidifies them, but authenticates them as being strong characters within the history of Israel. And that's why I think verse 26 is key. It was this Aaron and Moses. What solidifies them? Their genealogy solidifies them, that this is who they're associated with. It is this Aaron and Moses whom the Lord told, bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt according to the military divisions. Moses and Aaron were the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, in order to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. So there's your little parenthetical genealogy that is finished here. So basically go back to chapter 6 and verse 13, and then reinsert the story, re-begin the story here, or start up the story again in verse 28. On the day the Lord spoke to Moses of Egypt, he said to him, verse 28, I am the Lord. There's that phrase of power here, of giving Moses this phrase of authenticity again. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I am telling you. But Moses replied in the Lord's presence. The second time he says this, since I am such a poor speaker, how will Pharaoh listen to me? Well, here's the Lord's response. And Moses is just not convinced. He's struggling right now, along with the people, to understand, are you sure this is the way things are going to go? Because they haven't gone the right way yet. And the Lord answered Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and Aaron, your brother, will be your prophet. You must say whatever I command you. And then Aaron, your brother, must declare it to Pharaoh so that he will let the Israelites go from his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart. That's key here. And multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh will not listen to you. But I will put my hand into Egypt to bring the military divisions of my people, the Israelites, out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgments. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. Again, tie that in with what we saw earlier. The people are going to know. You're going to know, Moses, but even they are going to know. When are they going to know? When I stretch out my hand, what you mentioned earlier, Alan gave the emphasis there, against Egypt and bring out the Israelites from among them. So Moses and Aaron did this. They did just as the Lord commanded them. And at the time, Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh tells you, perform a miracle, tell Aaron to take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh. It will become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went in to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord had commanded. Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a serpent. But then Pharaoh called the wise men and sorcerers, the magicians of Egypt, and they also did the same thing by their occult practices. Each one threw down his staff, and it became a serpent. But Aaron's staff swallowed their staffs. However, Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Alan, there's a lot here as we begin to wrap up our study for today. What do you see here as being of great significance in this closing section of our study for this afternoon?
I find it interesting just the first verse.
Yeah.
Moses has been one of his excuses is that I'm not a good speaker. So Aaron, his brother, becomes his prophet. So in a sense, Moses is God, and then Aaron is his prophet, the one who speaks for him. And I find that interesting that's what Pharaoh receives. And I consider I think this highlights just the majesty and awesomeness of God. We can read throughout scripture that, coming before God, or just there's a veil, there's a division, there's a separation, because a wicked people, sinners, cannot stand before a pure, holy God. So there's always prophets, there's always a separation throughout all of scriptures until the perfect high priest comes. And that's the role of the high priest, to come before the throne of God and separate. He came as a representative of the people. Aaron becomes the first high priest. He comes as a representative of the people before God. So there is kind of a separation there between God and the wicked people. So I find it interesting that there is an added layer here, because Moses is God's prophet. Well, now there's even a prophet for Moses before he talks to Pharaoh. So it's like there's think of this as like two veils, two degrees of separation between God the Father, and Pharaoh. You have God, Moses, Aaron, then Pharaoh. Even the people got the message from I think this is powerful when we get to chapter 20, and God himself speaks to the people. So they receive direct contact from God. Pharaoh gets, I don't want to say watered down, but you can see there's levels between the two. And I think it's because of Pharaoh's great rebelliousness and wickedness. I mean, he's not, and even just the name. You keep highlighting the name. I am the Lord. I am the Lord. That's never. I can't think of a time when that phrase is spoken in the presence of Pharaoh. It's always God telling Moses to go to Pharaoh, and he uses that phrase. But that covenant name is reserved just for the people, and Pharaoh's not worthy to just even hear that name, or even. I mean, you get the sense he's not even worthy to hear Moses speak, because Moses has spoken with God directly. So to me, that highlights just Pharaoh's wickedness, and of course, uh, I mean, he sees these signs, he sees these miracles, and again, it's not just Pharaoh. I mean, the Egyptians and Pharaoh's people are not innocent in all this, because they have magicians that practice these wicked things, and they do the same. They're doing tricks. They're doing these signs by other means, the same signs, to dissuade Pharaoh, and to dissuade, just try to mock God signs. And I obviously, I think this is part of a plan of a progression, an increase in the powerfulness of the signs, to the point that eventually, I think, after frogs, they can't do anymore. They can do these first couple of easy ones, but they can't duplicate the last 9 plagues the same way. But verse 13, however, Pharaoh's heart was hard. He did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. This is all part of God's understanding and God's plan all along. He knew that Pharaoh's heart would be hard, and anything he did would not work. But I think in the mercy of God, I mean, he knows what Pharaoh's going to do. He could just kill them all right then, wipe them out, cause the Red Sea to just overflow and just drown them all right away. But he at least gives them way too many signs that they continue to reject.
And so I think it's key what you said, that the Lord knew Pharaoh. He knew the type of person that he was, and that the whole argument that you have here often whenever you talk about Exodus and the interaction between God and Pharaoh is, did God force Pharaoh to do these things? Was it determinism? Did God determine that Pharaoh would act this way? I think the clear and obvious understanding here is that God just knew who Pharaoh was. Again, think about it. This man grew up all his life believing that he would eventually be Horus incarnate, that he would be a god. He was groomed for arrogance. He was groomed to believe that he was superior. He was groomed to think that no one was as powerful as he was. Therefore, God knew this is the exact man that I would need to go up against in order to show the true superiority that I have. Why? How am I going to harden Pharaoh's heart? I want to present him with a choice that I know he will reject. He will reject what I've told him to do. And of course, that's exactly what happens. I think too, at the end there, Alan, as this whole thing happens with this first miracle, the throwing down of the swords, or throwing down of the staffs and the serpents, the whole thing that happens here is, as the magicians, the Egyptian magicians, are able to come in and replicate that. They're able to do it by the occult practices. I think this is the demonic power that we're seeing here, demonic power that's at work within the Egyptians. What happens? Even though they could replicate this power, the supernatural power, what does God show? God shows immediately it's still not on level with me, because my power, seen through Aaron, his staff, and his servant, literally eats them up. What is this a small appetizer for? Exactly what God is going to do in the plagues. A number of these plagues, if not all these plagues, can be directly correlated to various gods within the divine understanding of the supernatural in the Egyptian mind. What is God doing here? God is showing his power over everything that is Egyptian. Everything that an Egyptian might think is true supernatural power, God is showing it is nothing before me. I am the Lord. There is no true God before me. No one at all can truly stand up to me in power, might, and ability. And one last thing, Alan, just throw in there. Verse number 6, or excuse me, verse number 7, that Moses was 80, Aaron was 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. These are not spring chickens. These are some older men who are being endowed by great power from God. They're not the warrior age, it seems. They're up there in years. And even these men in their weakened state, considering their ages, God's power is seen through them. And they are shown to be mighty men by God being with them, God leading them, and God blessing them. Alan, what closing thoughts do you have for us in this afternoon study?
I want to talk about just for a second. You mentioned the hardening of the heart, and part of the confusion about it is it changes. The phrase changes throughout the next several chapters. It starts in chapter right here in verse 3, chapter 7, verse 3. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart. And then later on in verse 13, however, Pharaoh's heart was hard. So you get those two types of phrases, one that looks like God is doing the hardening,
Yeah.
and the other that looks like Pharaoh doing the hardening. So how do you coincide these? I really love this phrase that I found that kind of helps helps us understand it. The same sun that melts the ice also hardens the clay.
Mm,
So it all depends on the nature of the material. So what that means is, the sun is not any hotter, any less hot, any hotter on the ice than it is the clay. It's the same sun. The same thing is coming out from the sun. But when you have ice and when you have clay, those are two different types of material. Two different reactions take place, and that's what I think what's happening here. I mean, we would say the sun hardens the clay. That's not a wrong statement. And we would say the sun melts the ice.
mhm.
And you could also say the clay was hardened. And you could say the clay was hardened by the sun. All of those phrases are correct. But uh, you know, it was the material that, the clay doesn't melt from the sun, it hardens from the sun. It's what type of material we're working with. So clearly Pharaoh's heart was clay. It is, anything that the Lord did. Yes, the Lord was hardening his heart because he was speaking truth. He was speaking love. He was being the Lord. And because of the type of person that Pharaoh was, because of the material of his heart, if you will, his heart was repeatedly hardening because he did not make himself to be ice and melt and and be soft hearted to the Lord's message. He was hardening his own heart to the Lord's message. So I thought that phrase was about as good as I could get to explain what that phrase means, because we're going to see that on Friday as well. Every time it changes, the hardening of the heart. Pharaoh's heart was hard. God hardened his heart. I mean, it's all the same. It's just a different way of saying it, but the result is still the same. Pharaoh was still obstinate.
Absolutely, Alan. That quote alone has earned you your pay for today. Yeah, look at it from the perspective of the New Testament. The same gospel is presented to every person. Why is it that why do some believe and some reject? It all depends on the heart, whether
the,
someone is
par-
humble enough to accept or whether they're hardened to reject.
the parable of the sower right there. It's the
Right.
same seed, but what's different? It's the different grounds, and different results happen. It's not a different gospel, not a different seed, but different results happen based on other factors and the ground that it lands on.
Absolutely. Alan, thank you so much. Thank you for your great participation in our study this afternoon. Thank you for your great insight into the text. And we're looking forward to going through the plagues on Friday. We're not going to do a really deep dive into them. We're just going to hit them plague by plague real quick, give a few comments on those, and then continue moving our way throughout the text. And we hope that you'll join us for that. Thank you for those who have joined us, whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube. Thank you for participating with our study this evening. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those in the chat boxes, either on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll do our best to get to those as quickly as we can. If you're looking for a place to study the Bible tomorrow night, Chris Benson will be presenting a study here on the church Facebook page. You can join in on that, and we're also going to, I believe, try to go through YouTube as well. Hope you'll join us for that. I'll make sure to post a reminder and a scheduled live on the Facebook page so you know exactly what time that will be going on once I talk to Chris. And of course, we'll be back Friday for our next study at 5 o'clock on Walking Through History. Thank you all so much for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday. May God bless you in all that you do as you seek to serve Him and to glorify Him within your life. Thank you so much again. Have a great night, and we will talk to you all very soon.